Program is Labor MP Matt Thistlethwaite. We'll begin on this very topic. Matt Thistlethwaite, thanks for your time. Labor is saying that perhaps the version of events here, the timeline, is what hurts Bridget McKenzie. So she joined the gun club days before the grant was decided. Doesn't that also speak to a minister that might have seen the conditions of this gun club's toilets and decided it was a worthy grant?
Look, Tom, this whole thing stinks. It stinks to high heavens. There's clearly been misuse of taxpayers' dollars here, and every day that this sports rorts scandal goes on, it gets worse and worse for the minister. Today it's been uncovered that she spent $160,000 on a report into the health benefits of shooting, but that report didn't matter because she'd already signed off on $1 million worth of sports grants to shooting organisations. So the question needs to be asked, well, what was the point of the report at all, and why were they just looking into the health benefits relating to shooting and not other sports? I think it's quite clear, Tom, that the minister has misused taxpayers' dollars. She should do the honourable thing and resign, and if she won't resign, then the Prime Minister should sack her.
Just this gun club, though, the Wangaratta Gun Club, I'm not sure if you've seen the pictures of the club's toilets beforehand. They were worse than dilapidated. There was visual effluent in the toilets. These facilities did need an upgrade and they didn't have the money. It was $36,000. Again, this particular gun club, this doesn't seem like a rort, does it?
Well, that's the great shame about this whole saga, Tom. Question marks are now being raised about this particular grant and other grants when there may be cases where the funding was warranted. And the minister could have resolved that by simply declaring that she was a member of that particular club. She didn't do that. She didn't do that in accordance with the guidelines that have been set down by the Prime Minister, and that's raised a whole heap of questions about these grants for organisations, many of which no doubt deserve the funding. And that's why she's misused taxpayers' funds. She's misused the responsibility that she has in this portfolio, and she should resign.
What would Labor do in the future with this type of program if you were in power? There's a question mark as to legality, but if it's found that the minister was acting legally, would Labor change things so that this is not a ministerial responsibility, but it is only ever via an independent organisation?
Look, it's hard to say what you do from opposition without having the advice of the department and those legal questions clarified, but we'll look at that into the future if we are elected at the next election and make sure that with programs such as this that guidelines are followed and that proposals are chosen based on merit, as the guidelines state they should be, and that taxpayers' dollars are used wisely. The other thing, Tom, that we will do, and we've said all along, is that Labor would establish a National Integrity Commission, an oversight body similar to state ICACs with the power to look into matters such as this and ensure that where there is wrongdoing, that people are held to account and that it can't occur again in the future, so that the Australian people can have confidence.
And Labor's made that point, but you said you'll take the advice of the department. You could, if you wanted, pledge to not have these types of what are referred to as slush funds. Labor has overseen them before. The government this time around, regional development, sports, whatever it might be, that Labor won't go down this path again. You could make that commitment.
Well, it's hard to make that commitment from opposition when you need to see all of the details of what's gone on here. We need to get to the bottom of what's occurred and make sure that mistakes aren't made again in the future. Now, there needs to be a mechanism for the Commonwealth Government to allocate funds to projects throughout the country. And we've seen, in numerous areas, in infrastructure, in health, in education, that funds are established. And what's important is that when they are established, that there are guidelines that are put in place, and when those guidelines are put in place, they should be followed by the minister. And what's gone on here is clearly there's evidence that the minister hasn't followed those guidelines.
There's no inherent issue with the minister overseeing that. Is that what you're saying?
Well, if the guidelines are followed and they take the advice of the department, that's the appropriate approach
to
take.
But they keep getting broken.
They're
broken under Catherine King, which the government has pointed out. So the guidelines are always there. The ministers seem to see this as just too tempting.
Well, look, I don't think that the government trying to throw off and blame Labor for what's gone on here passes the pub test. I think that the only comparable...
It's not a case of blaming Labor, but that's what I'm pointing to you, that this has happened The case of Ros Kelly's been highlighted. The case of Catherine King, the ANAO, again scathing in that report that it keeps happening, that perhaps the issue is ministers can't be trusted.
Well, you know, in the Ros Kelly case, I think that's the comparable case here. Ros Kelly did the honourable thing, did the right thing and resigned. And this minister should do the same thing. Now, into the future, if Labor is elected, we will make sure that we follow guidelines and that taxpayers' dollars are spent wisely. And if there needs to be a mechanism to distribute funds, we'll make sure that they're as strong as possible.
Okay. Just wanted to ask you as well about your comments last time you were on Sky, talking about exporting coal. You said it would have no effect on reducing emissions, so that won't be a Labor policy to stop doing that. What about new coal mines, new thermal coal mines for exporting coal? What's Labor's policy there?
Well, look, coal mines in Australia, Tom, are operated by large corporations, typically multinational corporations. They're not run by governments. Now, governments put in place approval processes, environmental and social approvals, and new mines have to meet those. Now, I think it's fair to say that many international investors that are associated with these large organisations are starting to move away from coal. We've seen BlackRock say that they're going to pull out of new coal investments. We've seen BHP and Rio Tinto, the two biggest miners in the world, say that they're not going to fund any more thermal coal ventures. So I think that international markets are starting to move here, and that it's, you know, you're starting to see that these new mines into the future are going to have much difficulty in being funded. And Adani was a case of that. Adani, they struggled to get funding for the mine in international markets for the size that they wanted, and they had to downscale it.
Given that's what's happening and how big a part of the Australian economy coal is, particularly just on earnings at the moment, on exports, and what you've just spoken about there on reluctance to fund it, does that mean Australia needs a transition plan? Otherwise we could be mugged by reality?
Well, Labor's always said that over time, international investment markets are going to transition to renewable energy, and that's happening already.
And that's not a government transition plan, though, is it?
Well, at the last election, we proposed a transition plan, but unfortunately, we weren't elected. Now, in the wake of that, obviously, we're reviewing all of our policies. But the one thing that you can say, Tom, is that when Labor is government, we are strong on stronger action on climate change and making sure that we cater for the interests of workers that work in these industries. And that's our record when we were in government. And if Labor is elected again, that will be our record in the future.
But what was Labor's transition plan away from coal exports in the country? Labor didn't have a year that was going to end, did it?
No. No. We had a transition plan for people that were working in coal-fired power stations. We're starting to see many of those coal-fired power stations.
That's what I was talking about.
No, well, there wasn't a specific transition plan for coal exports.
Right.
Labor's always said that these are private organisations that run these. They need to stack up environmentally and socially and meet all of the laws, but it's up to international finance markets about whether or not they're going to finance them into the future.
Matt Thistlethwaite, we are out of time. We'll speak again soon. Thank you.
Thanks, Tom. Good on you.